Hello, and welcome to Senior Code Review Buddy. My name is Chris, and today I want to talk to you about how this book can make you a better developer, because it certainly worked for me. As I started my career, I often heard how important good communication was, and I generally believed it, but it took me a number of years to really grasp how important it was, as well as figuring out ways that I could get better at it. The major turning point for me was a cross-company project I led a number of years ago. There was a communication mix-up that felt like it would derail the whole project. It led to me literally hitting my head against a wall in frustration. Not one of my prouder points. Luckily, in the end, we were able to overcome this mix-up and still launch. And if you stick around to the end of this story, I'll share my top 3 communication tips that I learned as part of this experience. A number of years ago, my company made a deal with another company to get a custom version of some tool they'd been selling. We were going to run it within our tool. And one of the big changes for the version that we needed was we were going to run it in a sandbox, and it would only have limited access to the rest of the system. Now, this other company hadn't run their tool in a sandbox like this before. It previously just ran with full admin rights on the machine, so this was a decently large change. We worked together, and after some back and forth, we came up with a minimal interface that would allow their tool to work mostly within a sandbox with a couple of function calls out to the rest of the machine that we would handle. We got sign-off from everyone involved and moved forward with this interface in mind. The project moved along at a good speed and everyone seemed aligned, and our weekly check-ins suggested that everything was going well. We reached the milestone of running their tool in the sandbox, and I arrived at work that morning to see the code had arrived overnight and it was ready to use. So I started up our project, put their code into the sandbox, and it didn't work. And I was confused as the errors I was seeing in the logs didn't seem right. I tried running the code without the sandbox enabled, and it worked. So there was some problem relating to the sandboxing process. I emailed the other team and explained the issue to them. I mentioned that when I ran all of the code in the sandbox, it didn't work, but it worked fine if it all ran outside the sandbox. And then within a short amount of time, I got my response. And one sentence from that email is still burned into my brain. Quote, "We appear to have a misunderstanding about what fully sandboxed means." Turns out that of the various code components I'd been sent, one of them needed to be run outside the sandbox. It needed to do a few things that our sandbox interface didn't let it do. And after reading that email, I walked over to the wall next to my desk, and I let my head just drop against the wall a few times in frustration. I wasn't exactly slamming it, but I was hitting my head against the wall. I remember being so frustrated. We'd agreed months ago that all of their code would be run in a sandbox. If we run parts outside of the sandbox, it greatly decreases the value of the sandbox and the purpose of the whole exercise. A bunch of meetings and stress followed, and together we were able to figure it out. We explained to them again that all of the code needed to be in the sandbox, and then as a group we figured out what was preventing this one component from running in the sandbox. We had to make some modifications to the sandbox interface so that it could do everything it needed to do, and it slowed us down, but we did figure it out, and we got it working. Everything went into the sandbox, and we were able to launch this project, and the project was a great success. It's actually still one of the projects that I'm most proud of my work on. I spent a lot of time thinking about that miscommunication, though. I thought we'd been so clear, we'd gotten great alignment, and everyone was on board, but then this major mix-up happened. I'll admit that in the beginning, I kind of just wanted to assume the other company was being stupid. It just felt like the clearest explanation. But if that was the case, why was it just in this one spot? What happened here? And how could this be prevented from happening again in the future? I wanted to figure out how I could avoid issues like this in the future. And if I just assume, well, they were idiots, there's nothing I could do, that doesn't give me anything to do, and that's frustrating. Luckily, After some time, I've had some realizations that helped me out a lot. Now, I'd mentioned that we were licensing a tool they were already selling and releasing elsewhere. So most of the components we got were just slight modifications of existing components. But there was one component that was written just for us, and that was the only component they originally didn't run in the sandbox. So when we'd had our initial discussions about running the tool in the sandbox, they'd agreed, but they hadn't thought about this custom code as part of the tool. Instead, it was something special that they had just written only for this project. So they were going to put all of their tool in the sandbox, but this code they were going to write wasn't part of the tool. So we were using the same words with different meanings, and that's what led to this breakdown. But even with this understanding, it led me to a new question. When we had all these discussions about sandboxing their tool and code and kind of using the words interchangeably, why didn't they notice a disconnect and raise a point about it? I would have thought that they would have realized that maybe it was weird that we were emphasizing running the tool in the sandbox, but we wouldn't care about this one component. And maybe they would have just raised a discussion point to confirm that they had their understanding right on this. And this shined a light on something that I realized I had done a very poor job of communicating to them. I hadn't done a good job of explaining why we wanted to run their code in the sandbox. On our side, we had a number of reasons we wanted to run the tool in the sandbox. But on their side, I realized it was just a requirement of the project. I'd failed in communicating the reasons behind the requirement. And that was a big aha moment for me. I'd gotten the two teams aligned from a technical point of view, but I'd failed at getting us aligned on a purpose point of view. And that experience really, really made me appreciate and understand the importance of communication and alignment, even when it seems like everything is going smoothly. That experience and others and great resources over the years have helped me really improve my communication skills. And those improved communication skills have helped projects that I've been on go much smoother than I think they would have in the past. So what are my top 3 tips for better communication? 1, shared knowledge and shared understanding is extremely important. It's not just enough that everyone understands what must be done, but that people understand why. When people know why, they can see other issues, suggest better solutions, or just be better equipped to deal with unexpected issues that pop up. If I'd ensured alignment on the why in my previous story, I don't think we would have had this mix-up where we had a misunderstanding about what fully sandboxed meant. 2, you can only improve how you communicate. You can't change anyone else. You may find yourself dealing with someone that is super frustrating in how they communicate, and you think, if only they did X, it would be so much better. Well, you can share that information with them, but you can't force them to do it. The only person you can control is yourself. So whenever you're part of a communication breakdown or issue, don't just think about what the other people should have done better. Try and figure out what you could have done better. Now, I'm not saying that this means it's all your fault. There can easily be cases where the other person is almost 100% at fault. But even in those cases, there's probably something that you could have done better. And while you can identify and communicate issues that other people can improve on, the only issues you can guarantee will be addressed will be the ones that you decide to address. 3, try and build some social, non-direct work bonds with people you work with. If there is someone you've not interacted with before that you'll be working closely with on a project, try and set up some coffee time to chat with them, either in person or virtually. I've found that by having this basic human connection, it makes work communications a lot easier. If you know each other as humans, it's a lot easier to have a code review or other discussions because you know there's a person over there, not just some GitHub handle or email. Whenever I'd start working with a new team in another location, I'd try to arrange a trip to work with them in person for a week. The work I did there honestly wasn't that important, but being there helped me make some social bonds with the team. And then when we had any kinds of discussions or meeting later, they'd be talking to Chris, who they'd met in person and had lunch with, not just some random person in another office. Now, I'm not saying you need to become best friends with them or hang out outside of work or do lots of stuff outside, but I think just have some interactions that aren't work focused. It can still be at the office and during work time, but just try and see each other outside of a work only lens. Realize that you both do things that aren't at work and have non work interests. So, those are my main communication tips to keep in mind. I think if you take them to heart, you can really level up your communication skills, and I think you'll be surprised at how much that will improve your impact as a developer. And if you haven't read it, I'd really recommend this book, Crucial Conversations. I've added a link to it in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like button below and subscribing. If you have any comments, code you'd like me to review, or ideas you'd like me to talk about, please leave a comment below or reach me at chris@seniorcodereviewbuddy.com. Thanks, and have a great day.